From a historical perspective, concept of dhimmi is not considered an inherent cruelty or injustice, especially by Muslims. Instead, it is viewed as a system of covenantal protection and religious tolerance that was progressive for its time, granted within a framework where Islam held political supremacy. However, Islamic scholars and historians acknowledge that its implementation in history often deviated from its theoretical ideals and could be oppressive. Here is a breakdown of the Islamic position, based on the Quran, the Sunnah, traditions of the Prophet Muhammad, and classical Islamic law. The theological basis: justice and protection. A contract of protection, dhimma. The term dhimmi comes from ahl al-dhimma, people of the covenant. This was a legal covenant between the Islamic State and its non-Muslim subjects. In return for loyalty and payment of a tax, the state guaranteed the safety of life and property, freedom to practice their religion, autonomy to use their own religious laws for personal matters, like marriage, divorce, and inheritance. Quranic injunctions for justice. The Quran contains several verses that command Muslims to be just towards non-Muslims who are not hostile to them. Allah does not forbid you from those who do not fight you because of religion and do not expel you from your homes from being righteous toward them and acting justly toward them. Indeed, Allah loves those who act justly. Quran 60:8. This verse is central to the argument that Islam mandates fair and just treatment of peaceful non-Muslim citizens. The jizya tax, a symbol of submission and protection. The jizya poll tax is the most debated aspect. From the classical Islamic legal perspective, it was not inherently unjust because it was a substitute for the zakat tax and for military service, from which dhimmis were exempt. They were defended by the Muslim army without having to fight. It was meant to be affordable, based on a person's ability to pay. The poor, elderly, women, children, monks, and the disabled were often exempt. The ideally prescribed method of collection, as mentioned in some narrations, was to be without humiliation. However, historical practice often contradicted this, with some rulers enforcing humiliating methods to emphasize dhimmi subordination. Acknowledgement of historical restrictions and inequality. While the system is theologically defended as just, it was explicitly not a system of modern equality. It was a system of protected minority status that legally and socially enforced the supremacy of Islam. Islamic justification for the hierarchy. The rationale for these rules in classical jurisprudence was multifaceted. The system was designed to make the supremacy of the Islamic State visually and legally clear, preventing confusion and ensuring that non-Islamic symbols did not dominate the public sphere. A contract for residency. Since the land was considered Dar al-Islam, the abode of Islam, non-Muslims were granted the right to reside there under a specific set of conditions that acknowledged the state's Islamic character. The gap between theory and practice. A critical point in the discussion is the vast difference between the system's theoretical ideals and its historical application. Periods of coexistence and flourishing. There were long periods, such as in Al-Andalus, Islamic Spain, the Ottoman Empire, and Abbasid Baghdad, where dhimmi communities, Jews and Christians, thrived. They held high positions in government, medicine, and commerce, and their intellectual and cultural lives flourished in a way that was often impossible in contemporary Christian Europe. From a mainstream Islamic theological standpoint, the non-strict adherence was due to human failure and not doctrinal failure. When the system was implemented unjustly or cruelly, Islamic scholars would argue this was a failure of the rulers to adhere to the Quranic commands of justice and compassion, not a flaw in the original concept itself. In summary, within the internal logic of classical Islamic law, the dhimmi system was a form of just and pragmatic governance for its time, offering protection in exchange for submission. However, with modern principles of justice, most Muslim-dominated countries don't implement this practice anymore.